Trudeau and the federal Liberals float the idea of unrestrained governmental spending power. I'm Marco Perry. Welcome to the Perry Platform. At what point does a government overstep its bounds within a democratic context? This week, Trudeau and the federal Liberal government proposed an idea that did not sit well with me. This wasn't a partisan issue by any stretch of the imagination. Instead, it called into question the essence of democracy and our system, I must add, at a time also where it did not even seem appropriate. We can talk about instances where there is some validity to the idea of suspending democracy, but this was not one of them. The federal government floated an idea that would grant them unilateral power to spend money and play with taxes as they see fit without any need for getting parliamentary approval. They also wanted these control measures for 21 months. To put it simply, the current government, Trudeau's Liberals, are a minority. They need other parties to support their ideas for them to pass in Parliament. You would need a majority of votes to get anything done, which is only possible by collaborating in this context. This acts as a form of safeguard. If you spew nonsense as the leading party, the other parties hold power to combat you, to hold you to a standard, to force you to change your notion, to compromise if you want it to be passed. Now, of course, there are cases where the government is in fact a majority in and of itself. They hold the majority of the seats in Parliament. In that case, they don't need support from anybody, but even in a situation like that, there are still safeguards. For a party to amass that many seats, they would need to echo Canadian sentiments to a large degree. They would have needed to be supported quite substantially. Their decision as a majority would better align with what Canada voted for, as opposed to a minority situation. At the same time, we also have the Senate. They sanity check whatever comes out of Parliament. This way, even if you have a majority, you still don't have absolute power. You can put something on the table, you can pass it simply through your party's power, but the Senate has to review it. Sober second thought is provided by a supposedly nonpartisan unit. If you say something outlandish, if you say something ridiculous, they can strike it down and send it back to you. These are the checks and balances within our system to limit the scope of corruption and tyranny. Now, there are people who will say, well, it has some undesirable consequences such as it being slow. Things rarely pass, and then I would refute that by saying yes. That's the way things were designed to be. That's not a bug, it's a feature of the system. By keeping things slow like this, by not allowing a single entity to completely dictate what goes on in our country, we limit the scope of somebody coming in and just destroying everything. We build slowly, but we limit the possibility of complete destruction. That's how things are. We don't succumb to the allure of a tyrant like what happened in China, but at the same time, we don't move as fast as them. Usually. In this case, though, as I'll point out, it's a little bit different. Either way, though, it's fundamentally a trade-off, and you have to decide which side of that equation you want to fall on. So, a minority government right here, in Trudeau's Liberals, they are seeking to act as a majority for nearly 2 years. That strikes me as dubious. They want to have complete say over the spending, the collecting of taxes, and how things are going to shake out financially, even though they're only a minority. They don't have the confidence of Canada as a whole. It's one thing if we are at war, for example, and you need to make swift, unpopular decisions, to make a choice of whether to drop a nuke or not, a choice to take lives, a choice to save lives. These things come with a nature that requires some sort of hardline decision making, and that's why we do have measures like certain war measure policies that allow a government to make swift decisions in that context. Right here, though, with funding for programs, it's just not on that same level. It doesn't need unitary power for that to come to fruition. Trudeau isn't asking for the responsibility to make every decision in Canada. In fact, he's only primarily concerned with the ability to spend and acquire capital, money. This is odd to me because the other parties aren't even opposed to what he's been laying down. To try and grab further power in a context like that doesn't appear to be appropriate. There aren't much roadblocks in your way from enacting your ideas anyway. The CBC writes that the Conservatives were working closely with the Liberals. They were prepared to quickly approve the billions of dollars in aid and economic stimulus presented by Trudeau. That's why Andrew Scheer, still the current party leader, found this whole debacle to be strange. He says that we weren't blocking these guys at all. We were collaborating with them, and we were on the same page here. It's not like we're trying to shut down all of their ideas. We're approving them, and we are going forward with the plan as proposed. So, why then do they want further power? Why do they want us to be cut out? And not only us, all the other parties as well, the NDP and the Green, to remove us from the equation in this matter. Why do they seek unrestrained control of spending, borrowing, and taxing of Canadians? For 21 months at that, it's a lot of power for a lengthy period of time. Let's spell out some of the benefits and cons of the idea though, because there are benefits to it, and there are a lot of cons as well. So, the benefits: you will marginally be able to enact swifter decision making. For you to convene Parliament, that takes time. For you to debate, that takes time. For you to compromise, that takes time as well. And as I've said, there are cases where you need swift action. There is no time for this, like if you are in a war. But right here, it doesn't seem like the same thing to me. The other parties as well aren't even putting up that much of a fight with you. They're all on the same page. They recognize there are problems here, and we want to enact a bill to provide aid to Canadians. Your idea seems okay. We're going to vote on it, and we're going to pass it. Maybe improve it here and there, but nobody's actively trying to resist against what Trudeau is laying out. That's why I say in this case, it's only at best a marginally swifter decision-making process. Instead of convening people and debating for a couple hours, that might take a few days, you can just pass it right away. So at best, you're going to be ahead of the financial curve by 24 to 48 hours. As a matter of fact, most of our representatives are able to vote remotely now. They don't have to even physically go to the parliamentary session to get these things done. Special protocols are allowing government units to be swifter in this coronavirus context. There really isn't too much to say here about this benefit. Now, the second thing that this will allow them to do is to pass unpopular notions. If you have to rely on other parties to support you, you better make sure that what you're putting out there is agreeable. The Liberal government is a minority, keep that in mind. They can't simply just pass whatever they want. So, if their intention is to pass a certain maybe tax law to increase income tax by whatever percent to fund this program, but the other parties think it's a terrible idea, it's not going to happen. But if for some reason the Liberals truly want this to go down, they don't care what you think, well, that's one of the benefits of this idea here, of this concept of unilateral power. You don't need agreement anymore. Whatever you want to do, you can make happen. You can pass unpopular notions. Now, I go back to the war example, launching an attack. These things are unpopular. They will be debated heavily. But if you have to act, you have to act. If it's unpopular, well, that's not necessarily the same thing as saying that it's not the right thing to do. It depends on the context, and if you have to make that decision, a hard one, and other units are getting in your way, that's going to needlessly complicate the matter. But I keep going back to this. I don't view the situation at hand as one of these hypotheticals. It's simply not at that level. People are already collaborating with you. Why do you need these further powers here? There isn't much gain to get from the typical benefits of suspending a democracy. That's pretty much it for the immediate benefits from the citizen perspective. Now, actually, too, it reminds me of something else. The income tax. That actually was a tax that was passed by the government. It was supposed to be temporary during World War I, I believe it was. But guess what? It wasn't temporary. It was here to stay. This is one of the problems with these kind of notions here. When you allow somebody to make complete decisions, it doesn't really matter what they tell you. It matters what they do. And if they're able to do as they see fit, you're at the mercy of their whims there. I like the idea of debating with other parties. I like the idea of hashing out bad ideas and getting better ones. Freedom of speech and talking about things. It takes time, of course, that's the cost there, but the reward you get is a better fleshed out idea. You sculpt the sculpture a little bit more, and maybe you come to a better understanding of what you should do. If you simply pass what comes to your mind immediately, well, you open the door to a mistake. Now, I should probably mention too, I do think that the income tax is fine. I do believe we need it. But what I'm trying to get at, though, is that it wasn't intended to be a permanent thing. The government told you one thing and they did something else. There wasn't that many checks and balances to hold them accountable. And further removing these balances, it could backfire on you. Maybe next time it's not the income tax, which we can agree has its benefits. Maybe it's something that's entirely detrimental. Maybe it's a move that bankrupts Canada. It spends us into a hole. Our currency is devalued into non-existence. These things can happen. And it's easier when only one party is the one making the choice. Now let's talk about some of the other negatives of this idea here. First of all, you lose oversight and, as I mentioned, the opportunity to improve. You can put out whatever nonsense you want, but given these powers here, nobody is checking you anymore. Nobody is debating you anymore. Nobody is there to help you better hone in on your ideology. Nobody is there to help you find the errors and to help you fix them. When you don't have that oversight, when you don't have another party over your shoulder trying to make sure you are basically sane and not going down the route of madness, then you are more likely to go down that path. There are no restraints there. There's also an interesting phenomenon of polarization here. So look at our spectrum. The liberals are on the left, the conservatives are on the right. To get something done in a minority government context, you kind of have to move to the middle. The liberals will propose something, but they can't pass it on their own. If they want the support of somebody else, like the Conservative Party, they have to meet somewhere. They have to compromise. It moves us further away from the polls and closer towards some form of centricism, moving towards a common ground. Even with the NDP, you're still moving towards a middle ground. Even though it's further left, it's still coming toward some central point. For the NDP to come closer to the Liberals and the Liberals to go closer to the NDP. In a sense, it bridges the gap, but to allow a party sweeping control, they can just go to whatever poll they want to. I don't think that's in line with Canada's interests here. It doesn't account for the diverse views that we have. It doesn't allow for collaboration, and it makes somebody essentially a king, which ties into my next point here. By giving a party sweeping control, even though they are a minority government, they inch closer to tyranny. There are some places in our world right now where one party controls everything. And I know in this case Trudeau is only asking for control over the finances, but still, one party controlling the entirety of a segment, that does happen in some places like China, like North Korea, like Russia. And I don't know if we want to act like that for almost 2 years as they've outlined here. 21 months, it seems needless to me. It seems like we're playing with fire for a very silly reason, when we can already achieve our goals without going down that route in the first place. We don't want the possibility of abuse to occur. We don't want Trudeau and his government to have unlimited say when it comes to how we spend our money. Because what if they start spending it in ways that don't benefit the public interest? You're assuming a lot of things by giving them that initiative. It opens the door to corruption. Now, I like the government. I am not an anarchist, but at the same time, I understand that those are just people too. It's easy for us to put them on a pedestal, but understanding human nature, we know we must have safeguards in place in case things go wrong, in case something goes AWOL, in case somebody acts in a haywire fashion. To take away these protocols at a time where it doesn't seem appropriate, to me just sets a bad precedent. Any time now are we going to invoke these powers to undermine democracy, to allow a single party who isn't even a majority to act as if they are? I don't like it. I would be saying this regardless of who was in power. It could be the NDP, it could be the Conservatives, it could be the Green, it could be the Liberal. I don't want any of them to assume absolute power in a domain where they don't need it. That's a simple fact there, and I am against any form of tyranny that undermines democracy, unless absolutely needed, and here it is not the case. So, after receiving major backlash for this idea, the Liberal Party has backed away from it, and reportedly they're scrapping it. I believe that is a good thing. The nature of spending itself is a difficult one to manage, especially by one party. Everyone likes to hear about spending. People like getting more of something. People hate the opposite, which is spending less, which is getting less of something. These are natural tendencies. People are more loss averse than gain whatever. It hurts more to get taken away from. You can easily picture a scenario where the government just decides to load up on all the goodwill they can acquire by needlessly spending through the roof. It's a good thing. People like seeing that. You're going to make them feel better, and their image of your party is going to increase, but we don't want a government to act out of self-interest like that. We don't care about what's good for your party. We care about what's good for Canada. But the party might see it differently. Now, when I say a party can needlessly spend through the roof, what we consider needless is going to vary depending on our understanding of the word, but we know that a limit does in fact exist. It's a reality. If a problem only calls for a few $1 billion, but you decide to spend a couple dozen billion, that is needless. It might look better on you, to some people, to your voter base, but it's a waste of money. We want, fundamentally, to insulate Canadians from economic harm that is coming via the coronavirus while doing it rationally though, while being responsible, by figuring out the best possible package to put together, not by being willy-nilly with the numbers and not consulting other parties. I don't think the best way to achieve our goal is by removing debate and having one entity call the shots financially. It seems contrary to what we're trying to get here, which is the best possible path forward. It appears that the various parties are working together already, so that adds another layer to the uselessness of this unilateral proposition. I'm stuck on that timeline as well. 21 months, almost 2 years. That just comes off as excessive and not well thought through, especially when we don't fully yet understand what time frame we are looking at with this coronavirus here. How did they even arrive at this figure? It seems far, far too large to me. Now, Jagmeet Singh, the leader of the federal NDP party, gave the most powerful quote in relation to this story. He says that we need to drop what we don't agree on and focus on what we were sent here to do, deliver for Canadians. Precisely. Do that together. Focus on what you have in common, which is representing the interests of Canadians. That is your job. We all have our ideological differences, but fundamentally, we serve the same purpose here. Cut the crap and get to work. It's clear people need relief, so give it to them. Find out the best idea. You have to debate to reach that. We don't need to grant one party complete authority to have that done effectively. The contrary is actually true. We need more parties to give their input about their constituents, about their voter base, about what they know, to make sure we reach the most informed decision, the best plan. Don't be acting like one party has all the answers. It's not true. I should also mention too that Trudeau has done pretty well during this whole debacle, I would say. Of course he has his faults here and there. He's messed up occasionally, but holistically, he's been doing well. I can tell he cares. When he talks to people, that's his emotion coming out. It seems almost like a fatherly instinct. Trudeau, for all his faults, is trying his best right now. I'm not trying to trash on him, but I'm trashing on the idea that was put forward in part by him and his party. Trudeau's been doing okay. This idea here was a blimp. I'm not saying that he has to be cancelled now, obviously. I want him to do the best he can for Canada. I'm trying to help steer that conversation in the right way, in whatever minuscule way I can do that. Hopefully, as I've seen here actually, they've scrapped the bill and they're moving forward with a more holistic approach. Teamwork is a good thing. So, now, let's just go over what this proposed aid package looks like. They're going to be voting on this in the coming days, and based on the current trajectory, we're likely to see these benefits flowing very soon. So, first of all, there's a temporary boost to the Canadian Child Benefit Program. In total, $2 billion is being allocated to that. So, if you receive these benefits, you're going to get a bigger check in the mail. That will help soften the blow of the financial woes a lot of people are experiencing right now. Next, a new emergency care benefit program is being listed here. If you don't qualify for paid sick leave or employment insurance, this is for you. It looks to pay out $900 bi-weekly for up to 15 weeks, and that's roughly $10 billion in spending. So, if you need that, use it. Take advantage of the program to help you survive. Also, for 6 months, student loan payments are having their interest canceled. For all these students who have a lot of debt, they don't want you to be worrying about that right now. They want you to survive, focus on the essentials, and self-isolate. The homeless care program is also being doubled. That's a very vulnerable group. People who don't really have the means to self-isolate. They have nowhere to go to. They're on the street. It's easy for them to get sick, and they can pass it on to you as you walk by. It's not good for anyone, so it's good they're tackling that. Then, also, your tax filings are being extended to June 1st. So you have some more time to figure that out. They don't want you to be going to meet with your accountant right now, or to be stressing about how to crunch those numbers, so here are some extra months. Additionally, $305 million is being budgeted for Indigenous communities to help them establish what their plan is for handling the outbreak. A lot of them are just self-isolating. They've limited travel into and off of the reserves, and this money is going to help them better figure out how to move forward. There are some other actions sprinkled in throughout the plan, but those are the flagship proposals here, and overall, I do think it's good. And it's going to help a lot of people get through these tough times. The aid is needed by millions of Canadians, and it looks like the package will definitely be relief to them. And of course, I'll keep you up to date on the latest news regarding the scenario. So, that now brings me to the end of our conversation for today. If you enjoyed the content, be sure to leave a review and share. That'll help us grow. And at the same time, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at PerryPlatform. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you soon.